Good evening. Welcome to the March 1st, 2017 meeting of the Murfreesboro Planning Commission. We have a quorum present, so I'll call the meeting to order. The first item on tonight's agenda is to approve the minutes of January 23rd and February 1st, 2017. Are there any additions or corrections to those minutes? If not, I'll declare them approved as submitted. We have 6 public hearings scheduled for this evening, the first of which is an annexation plan of services and annexation petition for approximately 406.3 acres along Burnt Knob Road, Veterans Parkway, and Blackman Road, City of Murfreesboro. The applicant, Mr. Blomley. Good evening, sir.
Good evening, Chairman Lamb and members of the Planning Commission. Our first public hearing tonight is with regards to the annexation of the property that we've all kind of been calling the West Park property that the city purchased last year in anticipation of the development of the city's new West Park. But before I get into the nuts and bolts of the annexation, I thought it would be a good idea to invite Ms. Angela Jackson, our Parks and Recreation Director, here tonight. I know she was here last month when we scheduled the public hearing, but just to give the Planning Commission an update as to the progress of this project, because the Planning Commission will see site plans when once the plans are finalized, but they're far from being finalized now. But Ms. Jackson has an update on where we stand right now, just for your information.
Good evening. Thank you for having me here tonight. Where we are now, we met just last week with our City Council and with our Parks and Recreation Commission in a joint meeting and presented Kimley Horn and Associates, the A&E firm that we're working with, presented 3 different concepts as we are doing our preliminary master planning, gauging reactions to those concepts. We did additional follow-up this afternoon, actually, meeting with our Parks and Rec Commission as we are looking to choose what amenities and elements will be a part of that master plan as it is ready. Be happy to answer any questions or be available to you.
Okay. Any questions? I don't think so. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Appreciate it.
And we certainly like to thank Ms. Jackson for being here. I know that she and her staff are continually working hard on this project, and I know when it's all said and done, it's going to be something that we're very proud of as a community. The first item is with respect to the annexation of that property, but as you'll see on the map before you, it's not only that property, which is about 120 acres, but it's also a number of rights-of-way and additional parcels that, when we have the opportunity, we like to study big because we can always scale back the annexation. And we've reached out to all the additional property owners, and we've told all of them that that we would like to study their properties for annexation. But we've also told them, of course, that because of state law, we cannot annex their properties unless we receive written permission from them as the owners. So right now we're studying these properties for annexation. And certainly if the property owners, before the City Council takes this matter up, if the Planning Commission favorably recommends the annexation, if those property owners do not wish to be annexed and they do not submit us the petition prior to the City Council public hearing and first reading, we will certainly remove their properties from the annexation study and plan of services. But what we tried to do was take an overall look at the location of the park and the surrounding properties and the development potential of those surrounding properties. And also some properties that will be relatively boxed in if we annex the park property and some of the adjacent rights-of-way. And speaking of those rights-of-way, one of the most important components of this annexation study is the annexation of the right-of-way of I-840, including the interchange with Veterans Parkway. Our fire department has been very adamant that as much interstate rights-of-way be annexed into the city limits to clarify jurisdictional boundaries in times of emergency. And so by annexing this right-of-way, or the interchange as well as the ramps, it becomes crystal clear to them that that entire interchange is inside the city limits, and they know that it's their jurisdiction to respond in case of an emergency, whether that be a fire or another medical emergency. And so, of course, we want to do our best to honor those wishes of the fire department anytime that we have the opportunity like this, when we have property that's being requested to be annexed adjacent to I-24 or I-840 right-of-way. Also included in the annexation study is a 79-acre parcel, which will be the subject of a zoning request, which will be the third item on tonight's agenda. It is this property here that is owned by Mr. Donald McDonald and his sister. After we initiated the annexation study for the Park property, we contacted Mr. McDonald, and Mr. McDonald was interested in in having his property annexed and zoned. So he went ahead and submitted an annexation petition for his 79 acres. The remainder of the properties that are the additional study areas, we have not received annexation petitions, but we have received interest communicated to us from some of those property owners. Whether they decide to move forward with an annexation petition is not known at this time, but we have moved forward in studying them. The plan of services that is a part of this item on the agenda indicates that services will be able to be provided to the subject properties with some limitations. For example, the fire department, and you have a revised plan of services before you, because we were still gathering some information from the water and sewer department and the fire department as early as yesterday, or as late as yesterday, rather. The fire department has indicated that they'll be able to provide fire protection to all structures that are in the study area, because there are 6 houses in the study area, all those being in the additional study area. However, there's one on Mr. McDonald's property that needs some driveway improvements, and this has been communicated to Mr. McDonald. So one of the changes that you'll see in the annexation study and plan of services is that Mr. McDonald will need to construct some driveway improvements to his property in order for the city to be able to provide fire protection to it prior to the effective date of annexation. Also, we met with the water and sewer director and the city manager yesterday to discuss how the park property would be sewered. It was initially thought that there would be grinder pumps that would serve bathrooms on the park property. However, it has been determined that a gravity sewer will be extended to the property via a force main that will be bored underneath 840, and that gravity sewer will be able to provide sanitary sewer to more than just the park property. So the additional properties to the west of that we're studying that are located to the west of the park property, that gravity sewer will be in closer proximity to those properties. It's anticipated that at the very least that sanitary sewer line would be stubbed out at the western boundary of the park property. The exact details of sanitary sewer have not been worked out, but that is at this point what is anticipated. So there are a number of properties that do not have sanitary sewer available to them right now, but with the construction of the park property, it is anticipated that those properties that are west of the park property will have access to sanitary sewer. That leaves the balance of the city property on the north side of Lyle McDonald Court, as well as the property at 2206 Blackman Road, owned by Mr. Brewer, which would not have access to sanitary sewer. They would require an extension of the existing sanitary sewer line that is located on Blackman Road. With that being said, we do need to conduct a public hearing on this matter tonight and then formulate a recommendation to the City Council. If the Planning Commission, if it's the Planning Commission's wishes to recommend annexation of the city park property, it would be staff's recommendation to go ahead and include all of the additional parcels in its recommendation, and that would allow the additional property owners more time to submit annexation petitions to city staff if it is their desire to have their properties annexed. I'll be happy to answer any questions before or after the public hearing.
Okay, any questions from Mr. Blomley before we open the public hearing from members of the Planning Commission? Okay. Before I open the public hearing, I'll briefly go over the rules we conduct our public hearings by in case you're new to this process. We'll open the public hearing, ask you to come forward. Anybody that'd like to speak to come to the microphone. Please state your name and give your address if you would. Hold your comments to no more than 3 minutes if you would, because we have other people that might like to speak. Make all your comments and questions to the Planning Commission. If you have questions, the staff will make a note of your questions and we'll try to answer those at the conclusion of the public hearing. All that being said, I'll open the public hearing at this time for this particular matter. Anybody like to come forward to speak? Nobody? Okay.
What part are we going to be talking about right now? We're going to be talking about
We are on the first thing that we've been discussing here, sir, item A, 4A, annexation plan of services that I went over for the 403 acres.
Just the annexation.
Just the annexation
to address A only.
A only right now. We'll go on to the B after this. If nobody's coming forward, I'll close the public hearing. Questions by members of the Planning Commission? If there are none, we're ready for a motion.
I'll make a motion that we approve the plan of service and annexation petition with, I guess, the assumption or confirmation, I guess is a better word, that all the property owners prior to the city council meeting choose to be annexed.
Second.
All in favor indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
All opposed. Motion carries. Now, item B is a zoning application for approximately 120.5 acres located along Burnt Knob Road and Lyle McDonald Court to be zoned park, approximately 116.9 acres, and commercial highway, approximately 3.6 acres, simultaneous with annexation. City of Murfreesboro, once again, is the applicant. Mr. Blomley.
Thank you, Chairman Lamb. The second item that we have on the agenda tonight is the first of two companion zoning requests for the for separate portions of the annexation study area. This is a two-part zoning request that the city has made for its property, and this applies to the city's property only. The zoning request for Mr. McDonald's property will be the next public hearing on the agenda after this. So you see there are two colors on the map. The blue color is the proposed P zone, and P stands for park, and that is for the development of the city's West Park on the property. That park, as you could surmise, is a use permitted by right in the park zone. The purple area is requested to be zoned CH, Commercial Highway. It is located along the north side of Lyle McDonald Court. And all of this area used to be it actually is one parcel that has been bisected by I-840. So it's all part of the same parcel. But obviously with 840 being an interstate, it is there are two distinct parts of this parcel. The 3.5 acres on the north side of Lyle McDonald Court, the city has no intentions of developing that with a park use. The subject property directly to the east of the subject property, fronting on, or directly to the east of that parcel, fronting on Blackman Road, is already zoned commercial highway. So the city has requested commercial highway for that 3.5 acres. The surrounding land uses are varied. There are single-family residences to the north of the proposed park property, as well as to the northeast of the subject property. There are two convenience markets at the intersection of Manson Pike and Blackman Road. There are several scattered single-family residences located along Blackman Road, as well as further to the south, there is the Winslow Park at Berkshire subdivision. To the south of the subject property, across Lyle McDonald Court, is property that Mr. McDonald is requesting for commercial zoning, and that'll be the next item on the agenda. And directly to the west of the subject property, in between the park property and Veterans Parkway, is a large undeveloped tract, and then two single-family residences on estate lots. The general development plan for the Blackman community, which Ms. Green told me earlier today that her Blackman land use exhibits always look better than my Blackman land use exhibits, but mine are hand-drawn, which I hope you don't hold that against me. It indicates that the property should be developed as mixed use, which it's described in the plan as retail, office, civic, institutional, and high-density residential that accommodates regional employment opportunities. And the plan also states that it supports the potential for institutional facilities in the mixed-use classification. While the plan itself recommends plan development zoning for the mixed-use category, the proposed P and CH classifications will permit and support a number of uses that are recommended by the Blackman land use plan for this property. With respect to the zoning of the city property, the Planning Commission will need to hold a public hearing and then formulate a recommendation to the City Council. I'll be happy to answer any questions.
Okay. Any questions before we open the public hearing? None? Okay, I'll open the public hearing at this time. Ask anybody that come forward that'd like to speak on this matter. Seeing no one come forward, I'll close the public hearing. Questions from the Planning Commission? There are none. We're ready for a motion.
Mr. Chairman, I make the motion to approve subject to all staff comments.
Second.
All in favor say aye.
Aye.
All opposed. Motion carries. Item C, the zoning application for approximately 79 acres located along Veterans Parkway and Blackman Road to be zoned commercial highway, which is approximately 70.5 acres, and commercial fringe, approximately 8.5 acres. Simultaneous with annexation, Mr. Donald McDonald is the applicant. Mr. Blomley.
Thank you, Chairman Lamb. Our next public hearing, as I alluded to earlier, is for the zoning of the Donald McDonald property located along the east side of Veterans Parkway, the south side of Lyle McDonald Court, and the west side of Blackman Road. Total 79 acres, and Mr. McDonald has requested CH, commercial highway zoning, for the bulk of the property, totaling approximately 70.5 acres. And the 8.5 acres located across the street from the Winslow Park at Berkshire subdivision, he has requested for commercial fringe zoning. The commercial fringe zoning district, it allows a more limited number of commercial uses as compared to the commercial highway zone, and his requesting commercial fringe along Blackman Road there is an attempt to be sensitive to the residential uses directly across the street. The subject property, as I mentioned, is directly across the street from the Winslow Park at Berkshire subdivision. To the southeast of the subject property is planned commercial development zoning that is a part of the overall Berkshire development plan. That PCD zoning that you see, I'll put my cursor on it, that's for neighborhood commercial uses to be developed on the Berkshire tract. To the south of the subject property is the West Lawn PUD, and the overall West Lawn PUD consists of a number of different residential and commercial types of uses. The area directly south of the subject property is for commercial development, mainly retail and restaurant type uses. Across Veterans Parkway is West Lawn, and there's a multifamily site that's been approved, the site plan for which has been approved by the Planning Commission. To the north of the subject property, across Lyle McDonald Court, is undeveloped property that is zoned commercial highway, and to the northeast of the subject property is Mr. McDonald's acreage tract that houses his own residence and is zoned commercial highway and commercial fringe. You'll notice that on his property, the area directly adjacent to Berkshire was zoned commercial fringe, and the bulk of his property was zoned commercial highway, which is very similar to his current request. This property is also in the general development plan for the Blackman community, and it's also recommended to be developed as mixed use. In Mr. Roundtree, who's representing Mr. McDonald, in his letter to the Planning Commission, he cites the Murfreesboro 2035 plan, which is in draft form right now, so it has not been adopted, but it does recommend that this property develop as general commercial, the uses in which would be consistent with the commercial highway zoning district. The Planning Commission will need to conduct a public hearing on this matter and then formulate a recommendation to City Council. I'll be happy to answer any questions before or after the public hearing.
Okay, any questions? Okay, if not, I'll open the public hearing. Ask anybody to come forward that'd like to speak.
My name is Mark Nagorski. I live at 5703 Colchester Court, Murfreesboro, Tennessee. I'm here on behalf of the Berkshire Homeowners Association Board. I am one of the board members and am asked to represent the board. We met with Mr. McDonald last week about his proposal of the 79 acres, and of that, the commercial fringe acreage of 8.5. We are in agreement with this plan. We support it. In fact, we even let Mr. McDonald know regarding that 8.5 acres of fringe development or commercial fringe. We would really like to see that those not become box stores, but if it is a strip mall, we'd like the storefronts to face the Berkshire so that we're not looking at the backs of commercial buildings as we leave that subdivision. So in essence, that is our wish, and again, we do support Mr. McDonald.
Thank you, sir. Anybody else? Nobody? Okay, I'll close the public hearing. Comments or questions from the Planning Commission?
Seeing none, I recommend approval, subject to all staff comments.
Second.
Motion's made and seconded. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
All opposed. Motion carries. Item D is a PRD amendment for approximately 243.7 acres located west of St. Andrews Drive to amend the Evergreen Farms PRD, Old South Properties Incorporated as applicant. Mr. Anthony, good evening.
Good evening, sir. Thank you. Good evening, commissioners. We have a request from Old South Properties to amend the PRD for Evergreen Farms Phase 2. Phase 2 is located west of St. Andrews Drive. It was approved in 2004 and included 4 primary development areas. Area A would consist of 957 detached residential lots on 191.7 acres. Area B would consist of 68 detached residential lots on 19.7 acres along Cason Trail. Area C would consist of 280 attached townhomes on 35.9 acres, and Area D would consist of 28.2 acres of open space, primarily along the creek, which bisects the property. The total number of units that was approved in 2004 was 1,305. In 2015, the PRD was amended to allow an increase in density, specifically in Area C, which is the townhouse section. An additional 54 townhouse units were approved, and that increased the total number of dwelling units in the PRD from 1,305 to 1,359. Tonight, the applicant is asking the Commission to consider an amendment that consists of 2 major changes. First, the applicant would like to expand the boundary of Area C, the townhouse area, along with changing the housing type for this area from single-family detached dwellings to townhouses. This would include a density increase from the 1,359 currently approved units to 1,408 units. That's an increase of 49 units over the 2015 amendment and an increase of 103 units over the original approval from 2004. The second change the applicant wishes to make is to revise the lot standards for the westernmost portion of Area A. This is part of the single-family dwelling area. This revision would include reducing lot sizes and lot widths, but would not lead to any increase in the number of units in that area. Instead, the excess land there would go into open space. A neighborhood meeting for the proposed amendment was held on January 23rd. The primary concern we heard was from neighbors who reside west of Evergreen Farms in the county subdivision there. These residents wanted to make sure that the number of lots in Evergreen Farms abutting their own lots would be minimal. They were particularly interested in the numbers 2 and 3 backyards abutting their own properties. As you know, the county properties are significantly larger than the Evergreen Farms properties. Clyde Roundtree from Huddleston Steel is here and can address that particular concern and give a presentation on the proposed amendment. The Commission will need to conduct a public hearing and make a recommendation to the City Council, and staff can answer any questions that you may have.
Okay. Any questions from members of the Planning Commission? Mr. Roundtree.
Thank you, Chairman Lamb. Commissioners, staff, my name is Clyde Roundtree with Huddleston Steel Engineering. I'm here representing Old South Construction and Dan Bobo here as one of their representatives. And as Donald mentioned, we are requesting an amendment to the existing PRD. Just on, as far as the slides are concerned, this first slide basically talks about the relational zoning and everything around the existing PRD is residential, various forms, all the way from RZ to RS15. So just want to let you know that it is a residential area. That's consistent with our request. And as Mr. Anthony mentioned, there's two distinct areas. One is area, I called them in the pattern book, area C1 and area A1, just to kind of distinguish them. Area C1 is represented with the red bold lines, and that's really where the townhomes are going to be expanded, and the single-family detached is going to be reduced. And then the area A1, represented with the blue outline, is where where we're changing the lot sizes on the properties requested. The next slide basically shows the existing master plan that's been approved. The bold green swatch going through the property is Puckett Creek, and Puckett Creek's significant. The fact that one of the reasons we're trying to reduce the widths of the lot sizes and the overall lot sizes themselves is to allow us to stay out of the floodplain area in Puckett Creek and reduce the amount of fill that would be required in that area. So I just wanted to see the history of that on the master plan. As Mr. Anthony mentioned, the townhome area is the area we're expanding, and really it's just a flip-flop. We're taking out 66 home sites that would be single-family detached and replacing those with attached homes and adding basically 150 townhome type of homes in this area. So it is an increase. It's actually a reduction in density for the homes themselves because we're adding a little bit more acreage. So we're going from 9.3 units per acre to 9.0 acres, units per acre. So it's a less dense product, but we are adding more of them. The other area, as Donald mentioned, is the expansion west side of Puckett Creek. And again, all we're really doing there is changing the lot widths from 60 feet to 50 feet. And this is to be somewhat more consistent with how the market's trending these days, but also to get us out of the floodplain. That was really a key component to this decision. And as Mr. Anthony mentioned, along the back portion, the western portion, as you can see on this diagram, the county lots, everything to the west is county property, and there's a lot of cul-de-sacs, so those properties have kind of a pie type of orientation. So our commitment to the neighbors was to reduce the amount of homes that were behind their particular piece of property, and really with the goal of a maximum 3 homes behind, really trying to stay as close to 2 to 3 as possible. And then in the pattern book, we made a commitment if there's any homes, any lots that have more than 3 homes behind them, that we would add landscaping in order to kind of buffer that some more. It's not a landscaping per se, but it is using landscaping to kind of soften the impact of potentially 3 or 4 homes behind their particular piece of property. This is the overall summary. As Donald mentioned, the townhomes increased by 115 units over the 2015 amended PRD or PUD. The townhome density, as I mentioned, has actually decreased from 9.3 to 9.0 per acre. There's a net decrease in single-family detached homes by 66 lots, and there's a net increase of 9.4 acres in the green space, so we think that's a positive. The net increase overall is 49 units, living units, over the approved PRD of 2004. So we're talking about 49 additional homes. The last 2 slides really just kind of talk about the architectural character of the product that Old South has already developed within the Evergreen Farms. And really our commitment is basically there's all going to be siding, brick and stone. And in the pattern book, we commit up to 15% of the front facade to be brick and stone, the remaining 90% to be siding. But also, they started using carriage house doors in all their homes, which have a really nice architectural component to them, and that's a commitment that's been made. And it's also noted that their driveways are typically larger to allow for adequate parking for the homes themselves, so that's a commitment they make as well. And then the last slide, with the addition of the townhomes and the expansion of the single families across Bucket Creek, we are adding a pavilion, more green space. We're adding parks on both sides, playground areas for both the single family and the single family detached and the single family attached. And the dog runs are growing in popularity, including the Labradoodle, which will be present at all dog parks. But we are encouraging, the staff has encouraged us to look into the dog park phenomenon. And so Mr. Bobo, as well as Old South Development, is committed to making sure those are available to the new development areas. So I'm available for any questions. If anything comes up during the public hearing that I can answer directly, I'd be glad to, and Mr. Bobo as well. He's here from an expert standpoint on the development side if there's anything that we need to address after the public hearing.
Okay. Any questions from the Planning Commission for Mr. Roundtree?
Clyde, so there is no change in this with respects to the architectural or the amount of brick versus vinyl that was already approved?
Well, it's consistent with the product they're currently building now, Ken.
Okay.
They have a newer section those pictures were represented in the newest section of Evergreen Farms. The older section might have had a larger percentage of vinyl potentially, but what you see in those images is what's going to be consistent throughout the rest of the development.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Roundtree. Okay, I'll open the public hearing at this time, asking anybody to come forward to the microphone that would like to speak. Nobody? Seeing no one come forward, I'll close the public hearing. Questions or comments from the Planning Commission?
My comment is Matthew must be doing one heck of a job with the neighborhood meetings, because the number of people coming to public hearings has dramatically gone down as of late. And if there's no other comments, I'll move for approval.
Second.
Motion is made and seconded. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
All opposed? The motion carries. Next, excuse me. The next public hearing is annexation plan of services and annexation petition for approximately 5,000 linear feet of Shores Road right-of-way. City of Murfreesboro is the applicant, Mr. Blomley.
Thank you, Chairman Lamb. The next item is the annexation of purely right-of-way. No private property proposed to be included in this annexation. Back in 2007, the West Lawn tract was annexed into the city limits, and it took quite a while for West Lawn to get off the ground, but after the recession ended, there was interest in it and investment, and it's right now has become one of the most active subdivisions in Murfreesboro. There are homes and sections actively being constructed out there now. As I mentioned, we had a site plan approved for the multifamily component of the development, and before the Planning Commission this month, as long as it's in good enough order to qualify for the agenda, we anticipate seeing the townhome portion of the development, which is right where my cursor is located. So development is moving fast and furious on the West Lawn tract. Back in 2007, when we annexed this overall development tract, we did not annex the adjacent right-of-way of Shores Road. And as we have gotten into reviewing construction plans for the various developments that are being proposed as part of West Lawn, we kind of have a change of mind about the fact that right-of-way, it makes sense to have that right-of-way in our jurisdiction. One, for the very fact that a city development, a development that's within our jurisdiction, West Lawn, is going to be generating a lot of traffic that is going to be using Shores Road. Also, there are going to be city service vehicles that are going to traverse Shores Road to get to West Lawn in order to provide services. And these are our rolling services such as the Solid Waste Department, the Streets Department, the Police Department, the Fire Department. All of those city services will be using Shores Road to get to the West Lawn development. In addition, there is a realignment of Shores Road as it intersects with Veterans Parkway. Back in about around 10 years ago, around when this property was annexed and Veterans Parkway was being constructed, as well as the interchange, Shores Road and Blackman Road were realigned. As you can see, they intersect. There's a slight curve to Shores Road and a slight curve to Blackman Road, and they intersect at Veterans Parkway. Well, with the West Lawn PUD, it has always been envisioned that Shores Road would be realigned further to the north to provide a more gentle curve heading back towards Veterans Parkway, and the same with Blackman Road heading back towards Veterans Parkway. So it's still anticipated with the development of the West Lawn tract that both of those roads will be realigned, and both of them will still intersect with each other after development occurs. So in looking at this, we have a development project, the West Lawn Townhomes, which is proposed in the city limits. There will be a realignment of Shores Road in conjunction with that project, and the new portion of Shores Road will be in the city limits. The old portion of Shores Road, which we envision being cul-de-saced, will be in the county. And so it just made sense to have it all in our jurisdiction, because there will be a street renaming that will need to occur for the very small segment of Shores Road that will be left over after the realignment of Shores Road. The city is reviewing the construction plans for West Lawn, for the townhomes, for the single family. It just seemed to make sense to have that right-of-way in our jurisdiction. So this annexation plan of services and petition, there's actually no petition because there's no private property, only takes in the right-of-way of Shores Road adjacent to the West Lawn tract. There is a plan of services included in your agenda materials. The plan of services shows that we will be able to provide services to the right-of-way. Of course, the services that are provided to a right-of-way are much less than the services that would be provided if they're private property. But that right-of-way would come into the jurisdiction of the city. It would be the city's responsibility to maintain and for the upkeep of that right-of-way, and to fix any deficiencies in that right-of-way as they come up. With that being said, I'll be happy to answer any questions. Mr. Sam Huddleston is here as well if you have any questions for him. Sam and I worked together on reviewing this and making the determination that we needed to present it to you for annexation. And we need to conduct a public hearing on this matter and then formulate a recommendation to City Council.
Okay. Any questions? If not, I'll open the public hearing. Ask anybody to come forward that'd like to speak.
I understand that you're going to disconnect.
Sorry, sir, would you state your name and give your address?
Larry Tipton, 3371 Shores Road. I'm Lot 4, adjacent to the area that you want to annex. I understand you're going to disconnect Shores Road from Veterans and it not be passable from that end?
The very eastern portion of Shores Road will end up being cul-de-saced. And that's the way we envision it right now, and it will be west of those 4 or 5 properties. It will be realigned further to the north to intersect with Veterans Parkway.
Right. I understand you say it makes sense. It doesn't make sense to me as a property owner. I do not want to be annexed to the city. I don't want you getting your fingers attached to my property. It may be right of way right now, but I pay taxes on that property that's right of way. And I don't want that right-of-way being city-controlled. The city has nothing to offer me as a rural resident. And what kind of services are you talking about are going to be offered, or why is this wanting to be annexed for services when you've got all that land across the road that you could widen or take part of that land for right-of-way that's already controlled by city, and leave the rural residents alone that have that property and been living there for years? I don't understand why you say it makes sense.
Mr. Tipton, we'll try to get him to address that at the conclusion of the public hearing. Do you have other comments or questions?
Yeah, other than the fact that I want to make it known that I do not want any property of mine that you call right-of-way controlled by the city, and I do not want to be annexed.
Okay, thank you, sir. Anybody else? Nobody? Okay, I'll close the public hearing. Mr. Blomley, would you like to respond to that, please?
I'd be glad to. And I think that Mr. Huddleston might be able to provide some information on what services the city would be able to provide to the right-of-way with regards to upkeep and maintenance. We did discuss this with the city attorney, as far as typically we have a petition for private property, and we asked him for right-of-way. If there were any issues with that, and he said that he recommended that we contact the county to see if they had any objection to the right-of-way being annexed. We contacted the county planning director and the county engineer, and they both thought it made good sense to annex the right-of-way, seeing as it is adjacent to the city development. With regards to Mr. Tipton owning the right-of-way, Mr. Ives may wish to address that, but I would ask Mr. Huddleston to come up and discuss what the city engineering and streets department would what they would offer in terms of maintenance and upkeep of that right-of-way.
Good evening, Chairman Lamb, Sam Huddleston, City of Murfreesboro Engineering Department, members of the Planning Commission. Our street division would, upon effective annexation, would be responsible for the maintenance and upkeep of the roadway, including the roadside ditches and drainage system. We'd also be responsible for maintenance of the pavement and markings and street and stop signs. Those would be pretty typical for us. What we're anticipating here is future improvements along Shores Road, and so we've collected escrow from the developer of West Lawn to apply to those roadway improvements, and we've required the developer of West Lawn to make improvements to Shores Road. However, that required that they go to the county planning and engineering department and also to the county road superintendent for approval. So we're demanding things of the developer on roads that are currently county, and so we wanted to reconcile the ability to have engineering oversight and review of that, as well as long-term street maintenance operations of the roadway. I'd be glad to answer any questions on that point if you have any.
Mr. Huddleston, on the West Lawn side, would you foresee street lights and sidewalks and that type of development at some point, or do you think it would be maintained as an improved county road?
I think at this point we would envision it as being maintained as an improved county road. And Mr. Smotherman, I'm so glad you asked about street lights. A responsibility that the street department has, but sometimes we overlook because it's actually managed by the electric department, but the street department's also responsible for lighting our city streets. And so it would be an expectation on our part that we would work with MED to see street lights added to that particular part of Shores Road.
Okay.
Mr. Hollis.
Chairman, I'd like to point out that Mr. Tipton's property is not in jeopardy of being annexed. State law will not let the city annex anybody's property unless they make a formal request for annexation, and then we do a study on delivery of services, and then it's approved. We can no longer go out and annex anybody's property without their permission.
Right.
So that he does not have to worry if the road comes in about his property, the city coming by and annexing his property in the future.
Okay. Any other questions from Mr. Huddleston? Did you have one?
Yeah.
Kurt?
Mr. Huddleston, when do we plan on changing the connection from Shores to Blackman?
So there are two thoughts in that. The first thought is that the Shores Road side of that connection would be made concurrent with the townhome project that Mr. Blomley referenced. So while the work was going on to reconstruct and realign and rebuild Shores Road with the townhome property, we'd also remove pavement and make pavement improvements, add the cul-de-sac and extend driveways and those sorts of things at the same time. The second part of that being the alignment of Blackman Road would be upon development of the property east of Veterans Parkway.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Huddleston.
Thank you.
Appreciate it. Mr. Ives, you want to comment?
The ownership of land under old roads can be interesting, but it rarely has any impact unless a road is abandoned. As long as, I don't know when Shores Road was created, but I do believe it's been there for a number of years. And while it perhaps is technically accurate that the adjoining property owners own land to the center of the road, that's frequently the case. It's not always the case. As a practical matter, there's not anything they can do with that land because it's subject to that right-of-way. It's hard to say if anybody's paying taxes on that. Taxes are assessed against the property, and whether this particular number of square feet is being taxed or not, I would venture to say it's not, because it's public right-of-way. But the being subject to public right-of-way, it is subject, we believe, to being taken over by the city. That's standard today, and usually, I think in the past, has been standard that adjoining roads, adjacent roads are annexed because the city is going to impact those roads, and the city's development is going to impact those roads, and so the city should be responsible for maintaining it and keeping it in good condition. There will no doubt be turn lanes constructed on the west lawn side eventually. It's hard to say it would be logical for the turn lane of a road to be in the city jurisdiction and the rest of the road to be in a county jurisdiction. That can do nothing but cause problems for everyone, and so we're proposing to remedy that. We believe we have the right to take over this right-of-way, and the county is not objecting to it, and I believe we have the right to move forward with it.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Ives. Any other comments or questions by members of the Planning Commission? If there are none, we're ready for a motion.
I'll make a motion that we approve, subject to all staff comments.
Second.
All in favor say aye. Aye. All opposed? Motion carries. The final public hearing of this evening is the proposed amendments to the zoning ordinance regarding Section 2, Interpretation and Definitions, Chart 1, Uses Permitted by the Zoning District, and Chart 2, Minimum Lot Requirements, Minimum Yard Requirements, and Land Use Intensity Ratios. City of Murfreesboro Planning Department is the applicant. Mr. Blomley.
Thank you, Chairman Lamb. Our final public hearing tonight is some miscellaneous zoning ordinance amendments, and I do anticipate that we'll have more miscellaneous zoning ordinance amendments to bring to you next month as well. I think that we are trying to be proactive in addressing some deficiencies in the zoning ordinance, and to address some things that cause confusion. One of those things that this zoning ordinance amendment would remedy is actually kind of, it's kind of amusing to tell the story. It's not amusing to us on a day-to-day basis, but back in January of 2015, we, at our behest, we brought to you a zoning ordinance amendment dealing with removing the footnotes from charts 1 and charts 1 and 2 and putting them in their own section. That has turned out to not be a good thing. We routinely have calls from the development community, engineers, design professionals, wondering where the footnotes are. There are no footnotes in chart 1. There are no footnotes in chart 2. And so then we have to, it takes time for us to explain where they are to them, and it's just caused confusion over the last couple of years. So we are looking to remedy that by moving the footnotes back from section 15 to actually being footnotes in chart 1 and chart 2. That will make our lives much, much easier. Also, and Mr. Halliburton, I mentioned this in the day meeting a couple of weeks ago. Chart 1 right now permits self-storage by right only in the heavy industrial zone, and by special use permit in the light industrial, commercial highway, commercial fringe, and commercial local zones, and mixed use zones. I know that the Board of Zoning Appeals has expressed that they believe, and staff is in agreement, that self-storage facilities, the design of self-storage facilities have come a long way in the last 10 years, and they are typically a pretty low impact use, so it seems to make sense to that they should be allowed by right in the commercial highway and light industrial zones. And that would be one thing that would take the burden off the Board of Zoning Appeals and remove one step for applicants in wanting to develop self-service storage uses. In addition to those amendments, we are also proposing some amendments to Section 2, interpretations and definitions. There are a number of terms that were undefined in the zoning ordinance, and some terms that we needed to kind of take a look at, and they had kind of dated definitions. So you'll see that we are proposing to remove the Section 2 from the zoning ordinance and replace it with what I have in the amendments here. So we think that these amendments are a good thing, and we look forward to bringing you some more amendments very, very soon, that some of which Mr. Ives has been working very hard on, but we'll wait until the day meeting in a couple of weeks to give you a preview of those. So I'll be happy to answer any questions either before or after the public hearing.
Okay. I don't believe you have any questions, so I'll open the public hearing. Does anybody have any comments on this proposal? Seeing no one come forward, close the public hearing. I think we're ready for a motion.
Mr. Chairman, I make a motion for approval.
Motion is made. Is there a second?
Second.
All in favor say aye.
Aye.
All opposed. Motion carries. Staff reports and other business.
Chairman, I have none.
No, sir. Nothing? Okay. Seeing no further business coming before this commission tonight, I'll declare this meeting recessed or adjourned.